Welcome back to our podcast! Welcome back to another episode of Me, Myself, and I. This is an official confession stand podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Hannah/Spuds.
I'm Sam Swag.
And I'm Sarah Carbs. You're welcome.
This is our 5th episode, and we are reading A Court of Mist and Furies, chapters 14 through 28. We are starting out part 2 of the book,
The House of Wind.
Hannah will cut that out, it's fine.
Leaving it in now. No one tells me what to do.
Yes, Amarantha!
What's that dodgeball quote? He's like, nobody makes me bleed my own blood. My dad says that a lot. It's fine. Welcome back.
Let's turn on the steam just a tad.
She's still engaged.
Is she, though?
Is she?
Is she engaged?
Not at the end of the section.
Did she
Spoiler alert.
Oh no, she didn't give back the
Not
ring.
spoiler.
She didn't give back the ring because
It melted.
It melted off when she imploded.
Mm-hmm.
When everything. I would love to get that angry and just.
Right.
I feel like such a catharsis.
But where we leave off is Feyre is seeing this magical, mysterious town of Valaris for the first time.
Yes. So this isn't the night court per se. This isn't the place she went to the first time she was taken to the...
The night court is the land, and then there are cities within it.
I assume the night court's kind of like, you know, in regards to Valaris, like...
Printheon's the whole
Is
continent.
the entire continent.
Mm-hmm.
But the spring court has villages and stuff like that. Yeah. Is that kind of the hewn city is like just a village?
It's like what they think the capital is.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. But it's hard for us to wrap our
Sorry, like there's a lot of locations, so it does get difficult.
It's hard because part of Tamlin's move was to not educate her on the spring court.
Right.
So us as an audience don't really know how the other courts operate, just not only in general, but we were just never given that information. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot to wrap our head around now that we're in a new court.
Do you know what Valaris reminded me of when I first read it? I thought of Epcot when I first.
I've never been to Disney
You never
World.
been to
Somebody
Disney
take me.
Oh,
No.
let's
sorry.
go.
I'm such a
been?
loser.
I mean, I can't remember the last time I've been to Epcot.
I've
I was
been-
probably a child, a
I've
baby.
only been to Universal in Los Angeles.
You know what's so crazy is I complain all the time about how I grew up super poor because I didn't have AC or central heat or anything, but I've been to Disney World 5 times.
That's where all the money
That's
went.
where all the money went to.
Honestly, that's kind of cool, though.
Can you imagine not growing up with paper towels but getting to go to Disney World, seeing Mickey 6 times?
Childhood trauma.
Speaking of trauma, we first start off with Feyre being brought to Valaris, which is a hidden city. It's not a lost city.
And I believe when we left off, she only saw the townhouse. She hasn't even stepped out of the townhouse yet.
Right.
She hasn't quite seen it yet.
Right.
And she hears his, what we will eventually know them as the inner circle, is pounding on the door waiting to get in, and Rhysand's like, you can either meet him now or go to bed. She's like, peace.
I'm gonna go to bed.
I respect that, because there's definitely that point of me that's like, oh, well, I probably should say hi.
It was just absolute chaos behind that door, and like, she heard it, and she's like, no.
Honestly,
not
I
doing
agree
this.
with you. I probably would have felt obligated to be
just
like,
say hi.
How are ya?
Not saying hi, I was like, who made you queen of the castle that you can't you just got here? You're just gonna be like, you know what, I don't even care to meet these people. I'm just gonna go to bed. I mean, this is growing up a female in America. You have to be obligated to say hi to people. And so I genuinely am not in the mindset to greet people.
I would totally say hi.
Yeah,
And then be
same.
like, sorry guys, I'm tired, I'm gonna go to bed.
Nah, I would have checked out, I think. I would have pulled a Feyre.
That's why you're not as traumatized.
Yeah.
As me.
I like to process my traumas. You guys just keep going.
And I think that's like our thought was like, oh, she should do this, but the reality is it's actually really cool, empowering that she doesn't feel like she has to.
She goes up to bed and she rests, and what he tells her is that she actually will be meeting them at the House of Wind, which is his other house in Valaris, and it kind of overlooks all of the city. He said he doesn't like residing there, though, because it just feels so big and open, and
It's very much like the business home where they have all their meetings and stuff.
But there was something really significant about, I wouldn't say that Rhys takes her on a date, but that night he takes her around the city, dinner and stuff, and she hears the same music she heard in the cells.
Oh,
like
yeah.
when she was under the mountain, she realized that Rhys was the one that sent her this music.
And it wasn't music from the Spring Court, it was music from Valaris.
Yeah, from Valaris.
So sweet. Sam was such a sap at that point.
Well, because we're rereading the first book, I picked up on the clues of the description being the Moonstone Palace. So I'm reading it, and I'm remembering that it's Rhysand that does it. I'm like, oh my god, she's seeing the Night Court already and doesn't even know it. It was...
Sam's crying right now.
I let the sound ravage me, let them lay me flat, and run over my body with their drums, up and up, building to a palace in the sky, a hall of alabaster and moonstone, where all that was lovely and kind and fantastic dwelled in peace. I wept to be so close to that place, wept from the need to be there. Everything I wanted was there. The one I loved was there. The music was Tamlin's fingers strumming my butt. Blah, blah, blah.
She definitely thinks that it's Tamlin, but it totally wasn't.
I know.
Spoiler alert. It was Rhys.
It was You know what's so crazy? I was just thinking about that cell scene, hearing the music and stuff, and I think she was asking about how the bond work and stuff. He just I was just showing you what you needed to see to kind of lift your spirits. Think about how she perceived Rhys in the cell at that time. Do you think it forgives him?
It almost feels like he wasn't doing it to be mean, he was doing it because he was scared for her.
You know what? There's something that bothered me when she got to Valaris, and it's something that Feyre did that actually got under my skin.
Ooh,
she
what?
was so pissed off at him for keeping it a secret when it could have been a refuge to all of those people.
Yeah.
And I really just wanted to be like, Feyre, fuck off. You have no idea what it's like to be a lord and to have this much control and know that the only reason why he was able to keep it safe and keep it safe for the future is because nobody knew about it.
Do you think that it's because of her isolation? It's almost like she thought he was like Tamlin, that he was hoarding his riches all to himself, kind of like how Tamlin was isolating and keeping Feyre all to himself. That was my thought of why she did that.
I don't agree with it. It was so annoying.
That was my thought of why she reacted so strongly about it. I mean, Rhysand did basically the same thing Tamlin did. He just made a different deal with Amarantha, you know?
I don't think so. I don't think that he did the same thing because he truly sacrificed a lot, whereas Tamlin was cursed and wasn't actually doing the sacrifice. He knew what he needed to do to free his people. We have to remember he procrastinated so much in those 49 years where he wasn't sending his people out across to be murdered and start the trend of having a human with hate in their heart fall in love. He really didn't dedicate to saving his people. And even in the very end, when he did fall in love with Feyre, he sent her away 2 days before it was all over. He was not willing to sacrifice everything for his people, even the love of his life. I don't think that they're even remotely close in that sense because Rhys did it from even before he went under the mountain. The moment that he knew he was going to be cursed and that this was going to be a thing, he took action. It's not perfect, but it's what needs to be done.
I think, if anything, it felt like Feyre was more mad at herself and projecting onto him because she sacrificed so much of herself.
I totally agree with that. The moment she realized the amount of sacrifice that he actually did and how he put his people above everything else, she realized that they're very similar. And this is someone that she's been looking at in such a negative light because of not only the way that the people around her, like Tamlin and Lucien and Amarantha, are talking about Amarantha's horror and how he's just manipulating the game. And I think seeing that come to life, she was like, he really did all this and nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Well, let's go and talk about my favorite characters we meet in the inner circle. At that dinner, they meet Rhysand's second and third in command, along with the army general and a shadow singer.
So, second in command is Amren. And she, as Rhys describes her, is something
not of this world. She was also made like Feyre. And what we mean by made is that she wasn't technically born High Fae, even though Amren appears High Fae and Feyre's become High Fae. So they immediately have this like bond, and Amren just has this innate curiosity about Feyre.
Because they're similar. They're both. But also we learn that she is older than Valaris itself.
Yeah,
She's
and she was in that jail. They go visit eventually, which is scary as hell. Like, reading that, like, it's so creepy.
So creepy.
Going, like, through all the rocks, like, not being able to see the inmates, but being able to feel them. Oof, yeah.
And then knowing that Amren escaped.
Yeah, she
It's
somehow
insane.
escaped. I know.
And now she's second in command.
I know, of the Night Court.
Well, they're like, I love the logic behind that. Like, they're not even gonna bother going to get her. Like, if you've escaped the worst prison of all time, gotta have at it. Like,
Right.
It is so funny because Reese also says, everyone fears me, but I don't fuck with Amren. She just does what she does, and I just tease.
Smile and wave.
Smile and wave.
And Amren reveals as well that they are not the only made individuals in this land.
So Illyrians are technically a type of fae. They're not high-faced. They do not have pointed ears, which is always really weird when you look at fan art. But they all have these bat-like wings, which the internet has dubbed them affectionately as the Bat Boys. They are brutes. They are brutal. They treat their women like absolute garbage. They literally clip the girls' wings when they have their first periods and leave them for breeding. They literally don't treat... women in the Huon City and Illyrians are treated essentially the same. So within the Illyrian race, they kind of have processes, like if you're a bastard, you're never going to ascend the ranks past the lowest rank. And it's a brutal, brutal process to go through training. These boys are brought into it, at 7 or 8 was when Reese was put in one of the camps. And they are just trained and trained and trained until they are finally able to climb the ranks, if they have the ability to. So Rhysand is actually technically half Illyrian.
His
and
mama's
half,
side.
And half High Fae.
When he came to the Illyrian war camp to train, that's when he met Cassian and Azrael, the Shadow Singer.
Yeah.
So really, the only High Fae person in that room is Mor. Cassian first. Let's talk about my favorite Bat Boy.
Yeah, my favorite too. I love Cass.
Cassian's really interesting because he is he doesn't have any powers.
He's the general of the entire army.
Well, he is
brilliant,
very powerful because they use
but how Rhysand and Az and have magical powers, like magical fairy powers. But he doesn't have any of those abilities. But he's extremely strong and smart and brilliant,
and funny and witty, and has dimples,
and handsome and
the long hair,
and
the little man bun.
Ooh, I love
and
a
the
good
tattoos.
man bun.
When you think
what were we talking about again?
when you think
Daddy?
when
Daddy?
you think
What?
of Cassian, who do you think he looks like?
I have
That'd be creepy.
seen some people essentially show versions of Geralt.
I think Jason Momoa was too large.
Oh no,
for
that's
me.
that's how big he is though.
Mm-mm.
But the tribal if he didn't have if his scruff wasn't super long and the hair was a little bit shorter, he would be a Cassian in my book.
Okay.
Oh, there's also this Instagram guy who looks totally like Cassian. He's Pacific Islander. Ooh.
So Cassian was born a bastard. His mother was a seamstress in one of the camps and raised him on her own. He was sent to the camp at 7 or 8. By the time he got out, he found out that his mother had passed because they worked her to death, which was so devastating. He admitted to literally destroying the city that did that to his mother, the people that put her in that situation.
Cassie's story kind of reminded me of another character that Sarah J. Maas wrote in a different series.
Oh, yeah!
A little bit, right?
I can
Who?
see the parallels with Hunt.
Yeah, with
Oh.
Hunt. And then we have Azrael, who I actually think, I really like Azrael. Now, can you guys explain to me
That's
a little
why
bit?
you're Elaine.
Can you guys explain a little bit more, because I'm not as confident in this, what a Shadow Singer is?
That's the thing, is we don't 100% know.
He just can filter into the shadows. So you know how a lot of the actors winnow?
Yeah.
He almost winnows by shadows.
Even farther into the series, we still don't know a ton about Az, other than his backstory and how rare his ability is. Oh yeah, his backstory is even more tragic.
He has burns on his hands.
From his brother throwing it at?
Yeah, so his stepmother was always really brutal to him because he too is a bastard. So the older brothers from the legitimate family tortured him, harassed him. They kept him locked up.
That's right.
In the house, in the basement, which I think kind of exacerbated his abilities because he was literally in the dark all the time. So I think that kind of,
I didn't think about it like that.
So I think it kind of emphasized his ability and what he was going to become. I have a feeling that has something to do with it. That's just my theory.
He also is the definition of a wallflower.
Haha, he is. Poor thing.
I know.
Oh, baby
So
wallflower.
his brothers, they threw a fire at him, right? Is that how?
They just abused him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
like
like-
starting from his stepmother, and it just filtered into all the brothers.
I thought it was meant to be a practical joke that went horribly wrong.
Because he panics, because he was locked up and being held against his will. But what makes him so tragic is that he came to the Illyrian war camp so much later. He never knew how to fly because he was locked up most of his life.
In the Illyrian war camp, you learn to fly the moment that you can. You're so young.
It's like walking.
Yeah.
So
it's
he
very
was.
embarrassing.
It was embarrassing. He was so behind. He was a bastard, so he was already being treated poorly. How the three of them got together is that Rhysand brought Cassian into the home that his mother set up once he started attending the Illyrian training. They all kind of butted heads. They all hated each other until they, like, grew up. So Cassian and Rhys were in the love-hate friendship, frenemies. Then they saw Az and kind of took him under their wing. And also kind of...
I couldn't. I'm sorry.
Wings.
Sam.
Wings. And then they realized that the three of them were literally some of the strongest Illyrians to have ever come through a training camp.
The Mastriel, and we should talk about their siphons. So something that's notable on both Az and Cassian is that they have these glowing rocks.
So shiny.
So shiny. They're technically called siphons, and they're on their hands. And sometimes when they're geared up to war, they have more throughout their armor.
I think
And-
7 each.
Yeah, and then Cassian's are always glowing red, and Azrael's are always blue. And what they do is they channel the power into usable energy, as shielding or as weapons and stuff. A lot of the times when you see these Illyrian warriors, they have just this power that goes uncontrolled, and the siphons control it and direct it in a way that makes it more useful to them without just causing mass chaos.
Right.
And they're so rare. To kind of caveat how powerful these men are, most Illyrian warriors only get 1, maybe 2 siphons. And these
they got
men
7
each. They are some of the most powerful warriors, and Rhys's father saw that and panicked, thinking that they would one day overthrow him. So that's why Rhys's father separated the 3 of them during the Great War.
And that is why Rhys has daddy issues.
Among other reasons.
He's been alive for a long time.
Yeah, 500 years?
Yeah, I think more. Because they just said that the war was 500 years, so he
So
could...
Tamlin's closer to 500 because he was still technically a child during the war, but Rhysand was fighting it, so probably closer to 6.
Yeah, 6, 7 maybe. We don't really know for sure, but definitely more than 500.
I definitely think this section is very much world building in the sense that we're just kind of getting a lot of information thrown at us. We've reached the informational
Yeah, we kind of know what's going on.
What ends up happening is that this meeting is not only just to meet the inner circle, but Rhysand propositions Feyre with a potential job. That if she likes meeting them, they all get along, that she can join in trying to stop Highburn and whatever his plan is to break down the walls between the human realm and the rest of Prynthian.
Yep, the talk of Prynthian World War is starting to come, and he hires her.
Yep, she
As a
accepts.
Emissary, kind of like
Yeah.
Lucian is,
Yeah, so she becomes emissary to the human realm for the Night Court, is her official role after their dinner. Before we move on to the other bits, though, we did forget to mention, which is super important, is that, like Feyre flickering into Lucian's mind earlier in the second book, she taps into Rhysand's.
She sees herself through his eyes, and I think that's so kind of sad, because when she sees herself, she just sees this starved, sad, fucked up, like, image, and she's like, oh, I didn't know I looked like that. And now you kind of understand much more why Rhysand was so concerned about her appearance, about not eating, and how they were treating her, because she just realized that she looks rough.
That ability is connected to Rhysand, because obviously now that she's kind of away from Tamlin's grip, she's able to explore, try to figure out where all these abilities are coming from, which courts, which high lords. Rhysand is able to be like, nope, that's my ability. I'm a Daimani, which is his ability to be able to tap into people's minds, and that's why he's able to communicate with Feyre, telling her to build up her mental shields, so she's able to finally figure out one of her new abilities. After she obviously accepts her new role in the inner circle, she has her first nightmare at the night court.
It's her first nightmare with Rhys nearby, and it's so interesting because it's the moment where we see the difference between, I mean, as if we don't already see a million differences between Rhysand and Tamlin, but when she used to have nightmares in the nightmares in the spring court, Tamlin did not aid her when she was puking in the toilet, and Rhysand calms her down, and then when she runs to the bathroom to throw up, is holding her hair back for her.
And talking her down.
That's a good friend.
And then we also realize it's the first time that she has flames.
Yes. And she singes the bed sheets. He kind of takes that time and opens up to her about what his nightmares are from his time under the mountain.
Look at him be so nurturing.
I know. Trying to, like, just soothe her as she is dealing with it. And then he carries her back. She doesn't even know that he carries her back to bed with fresh sheets on the bed.
I think that's really important.
Cute.
I think that's really important, and that's a huge difference between Tamlin and Rhysand, is that he does open up about his feelings, his fears,
He shares his own agony.
Right, whereas Tamlin just buttons that shit up, doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want to acknowledge it, doesn't want to get into it, and Feyre needs that right now because she
thinks she's alone in this.
Right.
She's also just so broken right now.
Yeah.
I think that it's really powerful that she's in Velaris now, and she's lived such a life of poverty and chaos and tragedy that she's finally seeing that there's something good to the world, and it's not under the mountain, it's not the spring court. And it's funny because we constantly think about what Tamlin said, that everything comes at a cost for the benefit, and I feel like this is the first moment that she's in Velaris and there is no cost. Rhys pretty much just says, you don't even have to work for me, you can stay as long as you want. I'd like for you to work with me and have a job
forever if you want to stay.
But, like, he gives her the option, and he's like, you can just exist if you want to, and there's nothing that you have to do. Which is interesting, because I feel like every other aspect of her life has always been a give or take.
Yeah.
Or marginalized, or not given those options. It's been planned out for her without her say or consent.
We're having no good options. It's either like bad or horribly terrible.
Bad
like
to
this
worse.
or this.
Yeah. You won't like both, but you gotta pick one. And then I think we move on to
the bone carver.
The bone
going
carver.
to the prison.
This is one of my favorite scenes
This is a
in
good
the whole
scene.
series.
This is a really good scene.
It's so creepy. The priestess temples are being ransacked by Hybern warriors and soldiers and stuff, and they're trying to understand what the heck they're doing. And it turns out Amren kind of pipes up and says they're probably looking for the legs of the cauldron. The cauldron is something that kind of creates things that are made, and with it, you wield power over other people's magic. The way I viewed it, it's almost like the Big Bang. And the cauldron broke at some point, and people were piecing it back together, but it's still missing pieces. And so she believes that Hybern wants to break the wall that was made, and he thinks that he can do it by utilizing the cauldron, but he needs it at its full potential. It doesn't work as strong as it does without its legs or its missing pieces.
Not only are they trying to figure out what Hybern wants with the cauldron, their running theory right now is that because Jurian's eye and finger went missing under the mountain, they're going to bring this man back to cause further chaos in the world. So they think that this cauldron that created their entire universe as we speak could also bring a human back.
Put a little eye and finger in it.
Well, it is the culture of creation, so I wouldn't put him past it.
She, just being the ancient, otherworldly creature that she is like, you need to speak to other ancient things. And that's where the bone carver comes in. The bone carver is in the prison, and that's how Amren knows him. She was also in the prison at that time. And the bone carver is this creature of chaos that is imprisoned for a reason.
So Amren recommends that Feyre and Rhysand go to this bone carver in the prison, and they may be able to answer what Hybern's goals are, what the cauldron actually is, why the temples are getting ransacked.
Right.
Well, this is really cool. So Feyre decides that she doesn't want to go to the prison. Rhys gives her the option because he was going to go alone. And the first time that they do go to the prison, the moment she's outside, she's like, I want to go back. Like, I can't do this at this moment. And he takes her back. He does not force her to do it. And so they end up revisiting the prison and going
like
through.
A day or so later.
Because Amren gave her an amulet that she said helped her through.
Oh, yes. That's one thing we should describe about Amren. So Amren is so funny. She is this creature from a different world. She is so ancient that nobody messes with her. And she loves jewelry. She is so gaudy.
She's like a dragon.
She really is like a dragon. She just hoards fine jewels. Amren gives Feyre a jewel, and is like, this will help you fare in the prison, you know, it'll keep you safe. And we find about it later that it actually didn't do anything.
Yeah, no.
It had no power whatsoever.
It was a placebo.
Yeah, it was.
So
but it
funny.
helped. It gave her the bravery to go back because she thought she was protected, and Amryn was like, you never ever needed it. You just needed the mindset.
It was very sweet. It was very
It
sweet.
was very non-Amryn of her.
I know, right? But also weirdly Amryn enough to like lie about something to get someone to do what they need
A little
to.
manipulative.
Alright, so they finally get into the prison safely and they run into the bone carver.
Well, let's talk about the prison because it's so creepy.
It's so creepy.
It's
the worst of the worst.
They're hidden in the rock of the mountain.
But they can hear all the prisoners, and I bet the prisoners saw them walking through.
Oh, 100%. And it's like the
So
most
weird.
vile creatures of the world. And there's a point where they're walking past, and she can hear one of them scratching along the rock on the other side of it. And he was just like, we have to keep walking. And it's so interesting how they open up the cell where you put your hand on it and use your powers so you can enter. And I think that the only reason why she can enter is because she has part of Reese's power.
Yeah, because I think he's the only one that can technically enter it. So they get into and they meet the bone carver.
And it's a little boy. But not to everybody.
Not to everybody.
You know, Rhys-Ann really prepped Feyre on how to communicate with him. With a question for a question, they brought him an offering. They knew that the bone carver would have some interest in Feyre being recently made. So he is just nonstop asking her about her death and what that afterlife experience was. What kept her holding on. Would not drop it, making Rhys very uncomfortable reliving, you know, Feyre's death. After he pokes and prods about the afterlife and Feyre's death, that is when we discover that Hybern is most likely going to bring Jurian back, and then confirmed that the reason why the priestess temples were being ransacked is because the legs of the cauldron were separated. Hybern was already on it and was trying to get the cauldron up and running.
Right.
But he lets them know about one last thing that is needed to wield the cauldron properly, and that is the Book of Breathings, which they discover is hidden in the Summer Courts.
And
the human realm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
so that's a lot of information.
It is a lot of information, and I think what's important to also note is that the big reason why he did grill Feyre about her death is because
he can't die.
And he wants to understand what death is like.
Yeah, he wants to know if it's worth it. So, like, if he finds a way to end it all, what is coming for him in the end? But that's why he's so interested in what she saw in between dying and being reborn and made. I think he's starting to piece together a way that he can finally be free of this world and this form that he's in.
And he's clearly just as trapped in Prynthian just as Amryn is. That they are clearly from another world that we can't even begin to wrap our heads around.
And they don't think that they'll ever be able to get out of that world. And so I think the idea is that he is starting to think that he can find a way to just end it all. But I think he's scared to do that. Is it better to just stay as a prisoner? Or should I just no longer exist? What am I going to risk it all for?
Sam made a comment that the bone carver only appears to people in different forms. So it really depends on who you are, what he transforms into. So, you know, Feyre sees a little boy, Rhys-Ann saw Jurian. It definitely adds a layer to all of this that we're going to have to see unfold moving forward.
The little boy has vibrant blue-violet eyes and dark raven hair. I was waiting for that moment.
I did not put that together. I was like, oh, what a cute kid.
Yeah, he's probably gonna be real cute.
Yeah, I wonder who he looks like.
It's Rhys-Ann as a baby. Right?
Maybe you keep reading.
Maybe another little baby boy. Like, I was just like, oh, like it's just a creepy kid with dark hair. Like every single horror film. Like, oh, it's just the creepy kid that has dark hair that's sitting in a corner. I was wondering when that trope would show up. Oh, I did not put that together at all.
Love this journey for you. Love being here here for these epiphanies.
I'm so glad we backtracked to that.
I know.
Alright,
Worth
Swags,
it.
why don't you get us back on track and tell us what's next?
So they get back to the night court, and Rhysand immediately starts communication with the summer court. They also try to hatch a plan if and how they're going to get to the human realm to talk to the human queens to get the other half of the book. Their brilliant idea? Use Feyre's sisters. So, BRB to that point. While they're waiting for a response from her sisters in the summer court, Rhys is like, alright, well, if you have a little bit of ability from every court, he had a theory that she would be able to tap into any locks or charms or protections that any of the High Lords may put.
Not only can she unlock certain things from each court, but she can sense personal objects.
Yeah.
Like, he wants to test out whether or not she can actually be able to find something, because they will have absolutely no idea where this portion of the book is.
When they go to the summer court.
Yeah, when they go to the summer court. And so they're hoping that she will literally just be drawn to it.
So his test is for Feyre to retrieve an item of personal value from the place called the Weaver's Cottage. So the Weaver's Cottage, she is a witch, I believe, and Feyre is tasked with going behind her back as stealthily and silently as possible to see if she can find the missing item. And the catch is, if she takes anything else that is not technically hers / Rhysand's, then the Weaver is going to eat her alive. So it's pertinent that she does not touch what is not hers / his. And she gets to the house, door opens perfectly and silently, and she's singing this creepy ass song about turning a human into a violin or something. Disgusting. Ugh. And she is weaving. She's doing the big old spindle thing. We piece together that it was most likely human skin or human hair that she is weaving. Sarah is gagging.
I think about the roof of that house and I want to vomit.
Oh, yeah. So, after being patient and scoping out the room as silently as possible, she finds the missing item. And what is it?
It's a ring.
And the moment she touches it, the Weaver snaps her head and is like, who's there?
Which is so ridiculous. There's no way, like, I'm picking up something right now that's about the size of a ring, and you can't hear me do this. Did you hear that?
I think it's more so the fact that she's so into it, but she senses energies moving. Also, I feel like it goes to show how stealthy Feyre is. That's one of her skills, is to be unseen, unheard.
Yeah.
I don't know why I whispered that.
And I was kind of expecting her to, like, steal something. It wasn't necessarily that she doesn't find the objects, that she takes something else of import.
Or maybe both.
Or both. But then Feyre decides to do...
Once she's trapped in the house with this Weaver about to kill her.
Feyre pulls a Grinch and goes up the chimney.
It was brilliant.
And the Weaver follows her, and as Feyre gets trapped there, which this whole scene was, by the way, like, terrifying to read. Feyre panics, and she's reaching out to Rhysand, who leaves her hanging there. She finally remembers, like, oh crap, I have amazing strength, and she is able to get bricks to fall on top of the Weaver so that she can propel herself out of
and
the
helps
chimney.
get her out.
Yeah, and
Stuck the roof made of what?
Ugh.
It is so gross.
All that human fat clogging up that chimney.
Sarah looks like she's gonna vomit. And the roof
You
is
know
made
I
out
can't
of hair.
Yep.
She literally is running through the trees, and it's kind of epic.
And then Rhys is like, just chilling on a tree branch waiting for her.
And he's like,
a
oh,
dick.
it took you long enough. You know what it reminds me of? The Weaver's Cottage reminds me of Hansel and Gretel when they go to the witch.
Yeah. I was like Hansel, Gretel, Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah. No one ever leaves the witch's cottage.
Right, absolutely. So we find out that she got Rhysand's ring. It wasn't even something that the Weaver stole from him. He gave it to her for safekeeping.
And it was his mother's ring.
The last thing that's really important and kind of defines Feyre and Rhysand's relationship is the fact that he set her up for this task without really explaining to her how dangerous it was going to be, whether he was actually going to save her or not.
You don't say.
So she obviously snaps at him and puts him in his place and is like, you can't treat me like an object. It's very, I think, triggering to her from the perspective of Tamlin. So she's like, I'm willing to do this stuff, you just have to be transparent with me.
Yeah, don't leave me in the dark like Tamlin did.
That's a precedent that Feyre thinks is being set between the two of them, which will be important later in the series.
Right.
Oh my god, let's talk about that bitch Ianthe.
Rhysand shows Feyre, like, she's able to kind of walk through in a memory that he had of Ianthe.
Very, like, Pensieve-esque, like Harry Potter.
That's exactly what I wrote down. Like, very Pensieve. And I kind of imagine that whole, like, sort of bluish, like...
Yeah, the little
like,
watery, like, whatever.
type of vibe to it. This is before Amarantha, I believe.
I think a decade or so before.
Ianthe had asked Rhysand to come visit.
She wanted to visit the Night Court because we know how ambitious she is.
Oh no, I'm stuck on something. Your bed. So yeah, the thirst was real. Well, actually, that's not necessarily true because I feel like Ianthe is very much a
opportunist.
She's playing a game, like a long game, and she comes on to Rhysand pretty strong, and it's very
naked in a bed, strong. No.
Well, and it also gives us greater context to how she was around Lucien.
Right. And Feyre
Such
picked up on that. And Rhysand doesn't go for it.
Puts her in her place.
Kicks her out.
Breaks her hand.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I usually don't approve of Rhysand's brutality, but she would not let up.
No,
like,
she really thought she had him around her finger.
Right. She just was like, no, you really want me. And he's like, I definitely don't. Feyre makes an interesting comment as well. She does think about Lucien almost instantly about how Ianthe was so pushy about it, how Lucien was so transparent about not liking her. And then, of course, she moved to, however could she tell Tamlin when she goes back to the Spring Court about Ianthe's behavior, unless Ianthe's already getting into Tamlin's bed and doing this whole charade now.
We would not put past her at this
No,
point.
God, no. I feel like that is another reason why kind of helps Feyre come to the decision that there's just no point in going back. She won't be listened to. She's got a scheming viper in her bosom type of thing. Like
snake in the grass.
Yeah, snake in the grass or whatever.
She just realizes there's nothing there for her.
Right.
I love this about Feyre. She's starting to come to terms with the fact that she's starting to wonder if I love Tamlin because he was the first person to show me any type of compassion. I've lived such a life of sadness, and he was the first person to treat me as something other than this. And, like, even though it didn't work, you know what I mean? Even though it didn't work, it's kind of like your first love.
Yeah.
Like, your first love genuinely is not your endgame love.
Yeah. But it's relatable.
But it's needed and necessary.
Yeah. I think, like, I thought I was going to get married to Justin Timberlake when I was 6. I really don't want that life for me right now.
So, they finally get word or make a plan to get to the human realm to visit the Archeron sisters.
Elena Nesta.
To finally get that moving. Rhys, Cassian, Azriel, and Feyre as the emissary. And it's a very complicated travel because of the wall. They have to find the crack in it. They fly /winnow/whatever to get there.
They also, because he has essentially taken Feyre from Tamlin, they don't want to alert the other courts that they're on the move because they don't want to be intercepted by Tamlin in the
Spring Court buddies up right to the human realm.
Yep.
So they go the long way. But they finally make it, and Elaine sees Feyre. They shoo off all of their staff because they're all very sus of Feyre's random appearance with no horse, no carriage, no people.
And their father's not home.
He is back to being a successful trader.
And we should also know, they do not know that Feyre is Fae now.
No.
And so she's got her hair in a way that's covering her ears. But it's very clear that she's Fae because you can just tell.
And she has a tattoo.
It's the energy
Yeah.
that she has.
The last time they saw Feyre, first book, she finds out about Claire Beddar's kidnapping and books it out of there. She's like, I have to go now. And
I'm going to save the love of my life, Tamlin.
And they haven't heard from her in, we know it's been more than, 3 months or so? Because that was how long she hadn't heard from recent. Yeah.
Well, they had 3 months where she was under the mountain.
So 6 months.
Yeah, at least 6 months.
Maybe
6
8.
Plus. It might have been almost a year.
Yeah.
That's crazy when you put a timeline to it. So at least 6 months.
Yes, she looks very different.
And a lot's changed with the Archeron sisters, too, because that's when you find out that Elaine is engaged.
To a Fae hater.
Yeah.
So
she's got this...
She's an iron.
She's got an iron ring because even though Feyre warned them that iron doesn't matter against the Fae, they don't know better, and her engagement ring is iron.
So the boys come in, does not go.
She talks to her sisters a little
Yeah,
bit,
she does. She explains to them.
Nesta sees right through her.
Right.
Oh yeah.
She's like, I know
Surprise,
you're
surprise.
Mm-hmm. And I don't remember if her sister calls it out before the boys come in. Like, if she explains that she died.
does.
Okay.
Because Feyre has to tell her that they're coming in.
I mean, two of them are gonna have wings. Like.
Right.
Rhys very kindly left his wings at home.
Yes, he did. But it's kind of cool that he can just, like, make them poof, you know?
I know. So the boys come in after Feyre kind of catches them up on the whole, like, life and death and fae thing. Nesta and Cassian.
Oh, they are going at it.
Oh,
the sexual tension and the hatred there, I love it.
It's contemptuous and it's hot.
Cassian, what should we talk about? So Cassian resents Nesta so much for the fact that she didn't help Feyre back when the family was struggling, and Feyre, the youngest, was out there hunting on her own and putting herself at risk to support, and Nesta wasn't playing the role.
Mm-hmm. No. One of my least favorite things about how Nesta is illustrated in the first two books is, to me, she almost seems like the evil stepmother. We know that Nesta has a much better side to her that we're not seeing. I would have loved to have seen that a little bit more in this section, but she was just walls up, guns.
Yeah.
But you know the thing that I love about Nesta? She doesn't trust anybody.
Right.
She sees right through all of the bullshit, and she's like, you can't woo me with fancy words. But it was very satisfying watching Cassian yell at her.
It was a little bit.
But he also couldn't take his eyes off her.
Well, I think it's because she wasn't gonna back down.
Afraid.
Like,
and they describe Cassian and Nesta sizing each other up like an opponent,
right?
Like an equal almost. And I was like, oh,
that's
this
sexy.
is fun.
Like she did not back down. Az is pretty quiet. Rhysand's very respectable.
They crashed there overnight.
Yep.
And I love it. Rhysand warms the bed for Feyre.
Sam is such a sap.
I am. But that opens them up to, he kind of opens up a little bit more about his Amarantha trauma in the process.
Yeah, because she's like, thank you for warming the bed. He's like, Amarantha never ever thanked me for that. Not once.
I'm also just surprised that he did that for Amarantha.
I know, right? So eventually the girls agree to let the Bat Boys and Feyre use the house to try to communicate with the human queens to convince them to give them the book.
And now they send out the letters.
So as they're going to send out some letters, waiting to hear back from the queens, Rhysand and Feyre decide to do a little bit of training in the woods.
That's
trying
so
to figure out
to me. That, like, the woods that started this all, she's now training in with Rhysand. Okay, go on.
Figuring out what her abilities are. So she says that she wants to train by herself because she's having a little bit of performance anxiety with him being there. So he wanders off, and of course, not even a minute later, the Ator comes, and he's back.
And he's been missing since the end of the first book. He just disappeared.
This is another thing that pissed me off about Rhys. He knew. And he used her as bait, and she
again
instantly figures that out. Again.
Rhysand comes back, and...
Surprise!
I know.
Who would have guessed?
Stops the Ator. They're able to get a confession in that moment. He was hired to get Feyre, and they assume it's from Hybern. And once Az sweeps away and takes the Ator away, Feyre lays into him again. She's like, you promised me that you weren't gonna do this. Blah, 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 blah. We just discussed this. I would have been fine, again, if you had just been open.
Just tell me. You're gonna use me as bait, and I'll probably say yes.
It kind of all comes to a head that as misguided as Rhysand's goals are, having put Feyre through this a couple times, is that every time this happens to her, she always comes back to, I am so weak. I am out of breath. I have these abilities that I can't properly use.
She's incentivized to train harder.
He keeps saying, like, you stopped fighting, which she did. And
so sad.
I know, she did stop fighting.
Can I read the quote?
Yeah.
Her?
She stopped fighting in the first part of this book.
Just like with the Weaver, I'd forgotten how strong I was. And I think that's her thought, and he hears that, and he says, yes, you did, Rhysand snarled, reading the surprise on my face, that icy calm shattering. You forgot that strength and that you can burn and become darkness and grow claws. You forgot. You stopped fighting. And he didn't just mean the Ator or the Weaver.
It's a really harsh wake-up call.
Right. She had been told by Tamlin and Ianthe and a lot of the Spring Court that she just can't. She is too delicate, or she has a new role now that she needs to submit to. And she did. And she believed it.
Well, can you blame her?
Yeah,
She's
no.
been through hell and back.
You know, I think after her little pep talk from Rhysand, remembering what she felt like at the Spring Court, she finally does what she knows she needs to, and she officially breaks off her engagement with Tamlin.
In a text message.
I know! Text message breakup!
The letter was quick and simple, but each word was a battle. Not because of my former illiteracy, no. I could now write and read just fine. It was because of the message that Reese, standing in the foyer, now read. I left of my own free will. I am cared for and safe. I am grateful for all that you did for me and all that you gave. Please don't come looking for me. I'm not coming back.
Bye.
And Reese is like, are you sure? Is this what you want? And she's like, I am no one's pet.
So yeah, she broke up in a medieval text message.
Do you think this was the right call?
Yeah, 100%. There's no way that she would have ever been able to do this in person.
Right.
No, he would never let her leave.
No.
He'd literally hold her captive.
Well, and I think that would be her fear regardless, even if he said he wasn't going to do that. Even if, like, he's like, we can make this work. Like, she wouldn't trust him.
But she also probably didn't even want to give him the ability to get close to her.
Right.
Because she's so traumatized by him.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that Feyre should have done something aside from being with Rhysand? Be like, you know what? Take some money from Rhysand and just do her own thing?
But you know what my fear is? I think she doesn't know where to go where she would be safe.
Yeah.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, there is talks that everyone knows that she's in the Night Court, and the way that people view Rhys, they think that she was stolen. These other lords will probably go to bat for Tamlin because they don't see it as a justly action. They don't see the abuse that he put her through. They view her as the bride-to-be that's stolen.
Right.
And I think that even if she says these letters, a lot of people know that Rhys can control minds, and they think that he's making her say those things.
Right.
And so they're like, we'll just hang on to you until you've broken the bond. Rhys is controlling you. These are not your choices. And so they would almost take away the freedom that she has of finally voicing herself.
Do you think that that's how Tamlin's going to take this?
100%.
Right.
He probably thinks that Rhys is the mind controlling because he thinks that Rhys is manipulative and that he would do this. And Rhys is known to do that. He's done that before. And he doesn't understand Rhysand and Feyre's relationship.
Right.
And
or who Rhysand really is.
Yeah. I mean, they don't know anything. They still don't know about Valaris. They don't know about the Inner Circle. They don't know about all of this stuff and what he sacrificed. They just look at him as Amarantha's manipulative whore who can also control and read minds. Also, you look at how he treated her before he left, how he wasn't listening to her. So even if she was like, that's not true, it doesn't like that really matters to Tamlin because whatever she voiced to him before didn't matter. And now he has the excuse of Rhysand.
I'm anticipating, I don't know, like, I'm kind of anticipating a showdown between Tamlin and Feyre. Like, because I don't think that Rhysand can go to bat for her on this.
No,
I think
I don't think he wants to.
No, yeah.
Because if he did, he would never know if she did it because she wanted to or because he was a voice in her ear.
Right,
I think he truly wants her to make her decision on her own.
Right. He definitely did the whole thing of, like, you're not a pet, like, they made you believe this thing, but I think it may have been a little pushy, but I think he also was just frustrated with the circumstances of everything.
But you know what? My mindset is not even that he was pushy. I think that maybe he was fed up and that was his way of comforting her. I don't think he did it to make her an enemy of Tamlin. I think that he was doing it more from the mindset of reassuring her that you are worth something. You have all these people who treat you like you're worthless, and you're not a pet. You're not these things. That's how I read it when I read it.
Right.
And I think she's just been so brainwashed. He was saying that to, like, make her realize that everything that she's been told this whole time may not be the actual truth. So what do you think?
Breakups are hard, man.
Yeah, so hard, man.
So what do we think the next section's gonna shake out?
Well, obviously they're gonna go to the summer court.
And obviously, Tamlin will not take that well.
Yeah.
Well, not the summer court thing, but the breakup.
The letter, yeah.
I remember when I wrote my notes because I always kept track of like what my predictions were. I was very curious to see how the Lord of the Summer Court was going to react to seeing Feyre with Rhys. Knowing, because they all know. There's no way that they don't, especially when the Summer Court butts up to the Spring Court.
Yep. Yeah, because aren't they closer by proximity and
it's the
trade?
Realm, the Wall, the Spring Court, the Summer Court, and then it goes up.
Yeah,
and then the Night Court is at the very
That's
top.
right, they like kind of sit on top of each other like a giant sandwich.
So like you would assume that they're neighbors.
Right.
They talk. I'm curious to know what is going to happen at the Summer Court, where the book is, and if they're even able to find it. I'm also curious to know how everything goes with the human queens.
When it comes to the human queen situation, just seeing Nesta and how both of them reacted to Az and Cassian and Rhysand, I think there's gonna be, like, what is there, 10 queens? 6 queens. And which I kind of like that. The minute I heard there was a bunch of queens doing the human
like a bunch of
role.
lords.
Right. You know, there's this great line, and I wrote this down in our notes. So when more comes in before they leave to go see Nesta and Elaine. Mor says, look, I'm not coming with you guys. Just wanted you to know that. And Feyre asks, is it because of how they treat women in the human realm? And to know that women are the main authority in the human realm, I think is very fascinating.
But also, I wonder if they're going to be very similar to Elaine's betrothed
Right,
father.
same.
You know what I mean? Like, are they going to be doused in iron?
Well, we
Yeah.
also know that they don't live forever because they're human.
Mhm.
We don't know what knowledge or perspectives were passed down
Or
from
age
their
range.
predecessors.
We don't know
Yeah.
anything about them
We
yet.
don't, exactly. I mean, we can't all assume they're the same age. You know, maybe there's a little kid and there's like an old lady and like a couple midlife crisis Karens. You never know.
But you know what I do appreciate? It's so
Mhm.
interesting how all of the Fae Lords are men and the who they
Human
have to
realm.
reach out to in the human realm are all queens. That
You
is
don't
very
feel like
interesting.
there's like a stubbornness to that? Like, I don't know. It does make me a little grumpy just in the sense of like coming from a patriarchal society that the universe where men rule have these insane powers and stuff. And the women, although they're in charge of the puny human world, like, you know what I mean? Like, they don't have any special powers. They get old and stuff.
It's funny. Maybe you should keep breeding.
Gonna learn a lot more.
I was really hoping that Nesta would end up being a queen of the human realm.
Same. Well, when she said she was gonna go off on her own, I was like, Nessa's gonna crush it out there. I was not expecting her to still be there.
I was getting Arya vibes from her at the end of Game of Thrones.
Yes, she totally is.
Thought she was just gonna like do her own thing.
I was so shocked to see her at the house.
I
I
know.
really wasn't expecting her to be there.
I'm curious to know if she's just waiting for Elaine to be married off before she leaves.
I had that vibe too
Yeah,
as
that
well.
might be.
She kind of passes her off and is like,
Yeah.
she will be protected.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that Nesta not only is appreciative of how much that the betrothed loves her, but also the fact that she can finally relinquish someone who she has faith will protect her from the evil North.
Mm-hmm. Right.
King of the North.
King of the North.
More Game of Thrones.
Mhm.
So Sam, what are we going to be talking about next episode?
We are going to do part 3, which will be chapters 29 to 40.
Mm-hmm.
And we should specify, this isn't actually the part 3 of the book. This is our part 3. Technically, it's episode 5. I'll figure it all
No,
out
episode
later.
6. Because this is episode 5.
Oh, yeah. We're
Yeah.
gonna talk about
Next week will be episode 6.
I'll drop in some editor's notes. You'll hear my voice later on.
Right.
Like,
Right.
hi, this is Spuds. Up next, we'll be talking about episode 6.
All right.
Bye. Bye.